You're listening to Investigation Insiders by Intelligence.
Hello again, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Investigation Insiders. This is Forhad. I hope you are all well and safe. We have another amazing guest, my longtime friend and security industry mogul, Mario Doyle, from Doyle Security Services. How are you, Mario? Thank you so much for being here today. It took us long enough.
Forhad, again, thank you for the opportunity. I've heard some of your past podcasts, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Awesome. So let me give our audience a little bit of background in terms of just our relationship. So we met, almost 22 years ago, which again is crazy to think about. And we were both young managers at our respective security firms. I would see Mario at all of the walkthroughs, and I was just always impressed by the way he carried himself, how many people he knew, and probably how often he beat us out on nearly every bid that we participated in together. And, we share obviously an entrepreneurial spirit and overall philosophy on life, business, and family. So it was pretty natural that we developed a great friendship. And we started working together when Tony and I left the security guard business and went into the consulting and investigation side. Needless to say, I consider myself very, very lucky to call you a friend, Mario. And so that's the love fest component of this podcast. And I just want to thank you again for your friendship and everything that we've sort of talked about and collaborated on and everything before we get started. So perhaps you can start by giving our audience a broad overview of your professional background. We'll get into some of the details as we go for the two people in our audience that don't already know you.
Thanks, Farhad. And as I've said to you many times, you were the smarter one. You got out of the security guard business. But I was fortunate enough to find an industry where you really add value in people's lives, whether it's the employees that work for you, the customers you provide service for, the public at large, just the community as a whole. So when you do something every day that just warms your heart, and the overall mission is public safety, it's easy. As you touched on, I started my career working for some of the strongest regional security companies that existed. I initially started off as an investigator and kind of moved up the ranks within the organization. But what I found was in the late 90s, early 2000s, the acquisition activity had started in our business where the global firms came out and just acquired all the strong regional companies that were service focused and just service driven. And that's what kind of led me to starting my own company. But again, my 25 plus years experience in this business comes from just working with some of the best people, having some of the greatest customers that really, in partnership, where we build programs that just improve public safety.
For sure. And we'll get into some of those aspects as we go on here. But can you talk a little bit about where you grew up and how'd you get into the business in the first place?
So I grew up in the city. I grew up in Queens. I'm a Queens kid that spent my early life running the streets of New York. I was at John Jay College at the time, and again, had to make sure I found something that was comparable to uh, my studies. And the security industry was definitely an option because at that point, and as you guys all know, John Jay's focus is security management, law enforcement, police science. So I was scheduled to take all of the federal, state, and local exams, uh, and but while I was waiting for that to come to fruition, I felt that the related experience that the security industry holds would help with my professional career. And as I touched on earlier, I started with a regional company as an investigator and kind of moved up the ranks within that organization and within the industry. Um, and that's what kind of helped me get going.
Yeah, actually, something I don't know the answer to about you. Did you ever like pursue law enforcement at any point later on, or did you once you got into the private side, just that was it?
Well, once I got into the private end, I stayed in the private end,
Yeah,
and that was mainly because by the time I started getting the calls to report to the academy or go in to the next level of processing in law enforcement, I had already established myself in the security industry.
yeah,
Hindsight, maybe I should have taken those opportunities, but I mean, I always feel like at times you have a purpose in life, and I had an established purpose in the security industry.
yeah,
And those calls started to come in, but as you also know, and I know we might touch on it today. One of my I stayed close to my passion of law enforcement just from the people that we
yeah,
operate with every day. And in addition to that, in 2006, I got appointed by the Nassau County Police Commissioner to oversee the Police Explorer program for the Nassau County Police Department, a program I still oversee today, and a program that develops young adults into good citizens and future law enforcement officers and executives.
yeah. No, for sure. And it's interesting because if you go back to like when you were in school, I mean, there really wasn't a career path. Like I think anyway, in the private side to really get to like the level that you're at today, right? So I think, you paved the way really for others like that are now coming out of school or thinking about careers, not only on the law enforcement side, which always existed, but in terms of the private side. So that's all very interesting. So talk about, one of the things I mentioned that we share is the entrepreneurial spirit, right? And you already talked about this briefly, but um, talk about starting your own company. You talk about how it came about, but just a little bit more detail in terms of that process and how it came about, and when did it start? That when did you start thinking about doing that?
Well, it all kind of leads back to the fact that at times I feel like I was forced into it, and sometimes you need to be thrown into the deep end. What do I mean by that? I touched briefly on the fact that there was a lot of acquisition activity happening in our industry, and both you and I come from a background and work for organizations where quality was critical. I mean, that was the focus. And as that acquisition activity continued, what I found working for the organizations that acquired uh, the companies I was working for was the lack of focus on quality and the lack of focus on people. And you are who you are at your core. And you know, I mean, and I credit my parents, I credit my faith for who I am as an individual. And I couldn't continue to put my name on something that didn't put people first and provide a quality service every day.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
No, for sure.
you know, with that, you know, I mean, I took the step of kind of going out on my own, and again, it was scary, but you know, I mean, looking at it today, um, you say to yourself, why didn't I do it earlier, right? It's easy to say that today, but it was scary, and I remember sitting down with my wife, and my son was young at the time. And as we all live based on what we make, right?
Right.
So it was definitely scary giving up a six-figure job and going out on your own. My wife had one request. She said to me, "I like the house I live in. Please don't lose the house we live in." So that was her only ask, and thankfully, we still live in the house and we still love it.
That's amazing. So you talk about people, and again, like I mentioned, I always admired that about you, about like your relationships, how you connect with people, and all that sort of stuff. So I think we can all say there have been people that helped us get to where we are today. So who are some of the mentors? Who are some of the people that helped you throughout your journey so far?
Well, I think there's too many to list, but I'll talk about the person who got us started, right? So, um, I my first account in the security industry was Mizuho Corporate Bank, and I had serviced Mizuho Corporate Bank since the mid '90s, and I had a I had a customer over there by the name of Joe Sacco. And again, when you're starting your own company, nobody wants to be your first customer because you don't have that established uh, book of employees, book of business
Yeah.
that companies feel comfortable with. But he knew me as an individual, and he knew that I would never let him down. Again, just a person that helped us get started. Because again, with you and Anthony starting your own business, getting those first few customers um, is critical because
Yeah.
until you do that, you're not going to be successful. So you know, what I mean, we started with Mizuho in New York and New Jersey, a customer I still have today, thankfully. Um, and you know, what I mean, I always credit Joe for believing in me, and you know, what I mean, I worked every day to make sure he never regretted that decision.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, and that's a great story, and really, I mean, again, it goes back to just there's something just very special about those the first customer, obviously, but the early on, people that bought into you. I mean, that just never goes away. So stories. Again, our show is called Investigation Insiders, right? So one of the things that we thought about when creating this whole thing is to kind of peel the layer back, which we will as we move on here, but also share stories that kind of help better express different things that we're discussing. So in the security business, security guard business, obviously, I think it's fair to say there's a lot of negative stories out there. I was hoping to go the opposite route with you and talk about a positive story that shows how important of a role these men and women play in the security of society.
Farad, again, thank you for bringing that up because again, I feel, um, I know you work on it, I work on it. Part of our roles is highlighting and elevating the work that is done by security officers and investigators and frontline public safety personnel. So I'll give you, if I could, I'm going to give you a couple short stories
Sure.
of just some great human beings. So we had a security officer that worked for us, Melissa McGivney, and at a university on Long Island. She was responsible for the residence halls and was responsible in saving a life because as part of her duties, she came upon a student that had overdosed at the dormitory. And her training, her response, her care is what saved that student's life. And I remember speaking with the director of public safety, um, and he said the parents had no idea and could just were forever grateful because Melissa's response and her care for that student is what probably saved that student's life. And her as an individual, she's been involved in de-escalating domestic events. And again, when you do security for a dormitory, there's a lot of challenges with young adults. At times. With alcohol poisoning, they've never been away from home. They need people that are really looking out for their best interests when their loved ones aren't around. So that's one of the stories. I'll give you another quick one. I had a officer by the name of Kasi Apidogo who worked for us at a residential facility. And again, as we know, security officers are responsible for doing patrols, but he knew the community well enough to know that he hadn't seen a particular resident on the schedule that he's used to seeing her. So on his patrol, he went by her apartment just to check on her. And when he got to the apartment and kind of knocked on the door and kind of rang the bell, he heard her calling for help in distress. Now, if he didn't know his community, if he didn't care as a human being and as an individual, you never know how that situation could have played out. So just another example of what security officers do every day. I actually just presented a employee of the quarter award to a lady by the name of Letitia Lewis, who works for us at a major financial firm. As part of her duties, she kind of ensures that the perimeter of the property, 43rd Street in Times Square, the area is kind of secure. So she's, as part of her role, she kind of steps out and is doing a perimeter patrol and sees an individual that is on the sidewalk. You know what I mean? And instead of just laying on the sidewalk and instead of just walking past him, and she took the time to ensure his well-being. And what turned out was that he had overdosed. He was God knows how long he was on the street. The world was walking past him, but she took the time to stop, call the Times Square Alliance, call public safety, get him the assistance he needed. And we found out that from the EMTs that he was near death, but it was Letitia's attention to detail and caring as an individual and a human being that saved his life. So just a couple stories I could go on all day, Farhad, but I just wanted to give you just tidbits of what has happened in recent months.
So, I mean, that's a great segue into kind of what this show is about, right? So, there's been a lot of changes, obviously, Mario, since we first met and started in the business, right? One of the things that seems to be obviously becoming more prevalent is the use of technology versus people. And what you just talked about are great examples of why there's a need for people. And I imagine that there's going to be a happy medium with all this stuff where it's a combination of both. But I thought it would be interesting to get with you and talk about the past, present, and future of man guarding, and you know kind of work our way through it and see what your thoughts are. So maybe again, why don't we start by talking about if you can give an overview of what the business was like when you first started.
So I would say I tell people, Farhad, all the time that security is not just guns, guards, and gates anymore. When I first started in the business, it was more of a watchman role
Mhm.
than which it was compared to today, where you're requiring a security professional. I mean, it felt like initially it was simply the person was there to detect, deter, and report. But that has changed into we have to now be forward thinking. We have to be, it's more preventive. It's more of a strategic plan for security. Again, with the advances in technologies, and I know we'll talk about it, uh, whether it's the digital technology, whether it's the AI, security officers and security teams are armed with information that if digested regularly will give us trends to ensure that we are now coming up with intelligence-led security programs rather than just responsive security programs.
Yeah. So again, that's interesting. So like I agree with you in terms of like again, 25 years ago, the business was I mean, people actually referred to officers as like warm bodies and just observe and report, and there wasn't really much sophistication. Obviously, I think there are like events like 9/11 and others that sort of started the change of that, and today it's very very different, right? So let's talk a little bit today about like and I know you alluded to it, but some of the things that officers are involved in. What are some of the things that maybe technology has replaced that was being done by people before, and how overall is it better or worse in your opinion?
So I would say it's better for many reasons. I think technology, the advances that have taken place over the last 25 years that I've been in the business, are changing that perception from a guard, a security guard, to a security professional, right?
Yep.
And that's a critical point, because to exactly something you just said, the mindset was I need a warm body to ensure that my facility is secure 24/7. And now with the advances in technology, you don't need a warm body. So yes, there's a cost associated with the technology, but there's also a reduction in the reduction in the amount of bodies you need to truly secure your property. And
Right.
again, we deal with human beings every day, right? So I tell people the best programs are a combination of the best people and the best technology. You may invest millions of dollars and have the state of the art technology, but if you don't have the right people that that are maximizing its abilities, it's a wasted investment. So again, I find, and I will touch on it a little bit. You look at some of the advancements from an AI perspective. You look at some of the advancements from a robotics perspective. I'll give you just an example of something we're doing. We have a security operations center based out of our headquarters that does remote monitoring for facilities and alarms across the country. So it could have been, there was a point where there were security officers stationed um, at a facility to ensure its safety and security. Now, with the advances in technology, I can do a virtual tour. I can dispatch law enforcement. I can grant access into a community. Um, it doesn't need to have a body there. Uh, and you're actually managing exceptions. I mean, we've all sat in a control room with hundreds of cameras, sometimes thousands, right? It's unrealistic to believe that one operator, maybe two operators, are going to catch something as it's happening on a bank of hundreds of cameras. But with the advances in technology and the AI that's built into the cameras today, the camera's actually telling you I've got an abnormal activity that you need to review and respond to. It could be a rodent or it could be a intruder, but you're
Yep.
now giving you're managing by exception rather than hoping to see something that might come across your screen for seconds.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. I remember when we worked for Guardsmark, one of the themes, the company itself was generally higher price than many of our competitors. And one of the common themes was the value of your security dollar, right? So not the spend, but the value. And, like one of the things, just as you're talking, that came back to me because everything that you just talked about is really that is now the spend, you're getting higher value from that spend through sort of the combination of the different resources that are available to you. So it's kind of neat to kind of see that sort of connection. But the so talk about like the future. I mean, what do you think? What do you think the future looks like in terms of people, technology, robot, everything? I mean, what do you think?
Well, well, I feel, as I touched on, it's got to be a it's got to be a combination. We've got to continue to build security professionals that make the security industry a career versus a job, right?
Right.
And that comes with professionalizing the positions that they're in. I have security staff that in the past would have never considered a career in the security industry. But
Right.
because of where they're assigned and the value that they're adding, it it truly gives them what they're looking for in a career. And again, it also ties to compensation, right? So, we're continuously elevating compensation to stay on par with the new responsibilities. I mean, you take some of our SOC operations, we've got intelligence analysts that are embedded in it. So it's not just um, dealing with a problem as it comes up. It's managing a global program, a regional program, or possibly a local program with a team of security professionals.
Right. Yeah. No. For sure, I completely agree with you. Now, so let's talk about like customers, right? Well, maybe not customers is the right word, but people that are consumers of either outsourced or proprietary security officers. What factors should they be concerned about with all of the different things that we talked about as it relates to their program? What makes it better or worse? Like, what should they be thinking about?
Well, again, what I always share with just consumers in general is ensuring that the provider that they select or partner with continuously adds value to their program, right? You know, I have I have been successful not because of anything I've done, but because of the team that I have developed. People that are better than me, smarter than me, and individuals that truly bring diversity um, when it comes to experience to the table, whether it's the military experience, whether it's the law enforcement experience, or whether it's experience as a security professional. Again, I think consumers have to look past what the rate is that's being charged for an hourly service and just look at the capabilities, the depth, and ensuring they're partnering with an organization that provides solutions rather than services.
Right. Right. Yep. No, for sure. And yeah, it's interesting. One of the things about it is that, it, one size doesn't fit all, right? And I think you would agree, even with Doyle, your company is not the right solution for every single potential consumer out there, right? So it's important to also make sure that the company or, you know, your internal program aligns with what your specific needs are.
Absolutely. Again, it's looking at the experience companies have in the vertical that the customer exists in.
Yep.
And again, it's the solutions
Yep.
that are brought to the table. Whether it's academia, whether it's financial, whether it's commercial real estate, whether it's the media industry. Every solution has to be a customized solution, but you
Yep.
want a organization that has been battle tested. And again, if you look at the last couple of decades and all the challenges that we faced, you want a team that's battle tested. You want a company that's battle tested, because when those events arise, um, and they will, over time, you need somebody that has the ability to scale up and support you with whatever that need is. And you're absolutely right about one size doesn't fit all, because the key is a partnership relationship. The key is, I tell people all day, every day, when I have an organization that treats me like a security partner, they get so much more out of me, my organization, my staff, than if they treated us as a vendor that they hired to provide services. So it's that
Right.
partnership relationship. It's that like-minded thinking. It's that progressive mentality. It's that it's that focus on continuous improvement that um, will make programs successful.
No, absolutely. And I really appreciate your feedback. Again, I think that you and the organization have really taken a lead position in the business, and I'm sure people will appreciate hearing direct from you. So I wanted to also, just before we concluded here, talk a little bit about your off the court activity. And I know you're involved in a lot. So can you tell us about some of the things that you're involved with, both in the industry and the community?
Absolutely. And so I tell people I was raised with the mindset that you have to give back um, to the industry that puts a roof over your head and food on the table. And a couple of the organizations that I've been involved in and I'm passionate about, I have spent probably close to 2 decades in a leadership role with ASIS International. And I think ASIS International just provides so much value to our industry from an education, from a networking, from just a resource standpoint. I've served as their regional vice president and kind of helped oversee the New York chapters to ensure that security professionals have the resources they need to be successful. They have the relationships that are needed to be successful. And more importantly, the education to distinguish themselves through professional certifications as subject matter experts. In addition, I chair the U.S. component of TinyG, which is the Terrorist Information New York Group. It was a counterterrorism information sharing organization that was founded after the 7/7 bombings in London. And what at that point I was responsible to provide security for the program at Thomson Reuters, which was based at 3 Times Square. And Tiny G came to life because we realized that major financial firms not only had a presence in the New York area, but in the Canary Wharf area of London. So, along with some retired law enforcement, active at the time, retired now from the Metropolitan Police and the NYPD, we created TinyG, and it provides a resource. We're in close to 185 countries with members. We try to provide those counterterrorism training and resources and connections to anybody that might need it to ensure safety for our homeland. I touched on it a little bit earlier. One of my passions is preparing the next generation of security professionals in law enforcement. And I've overseen the Police Explorer program for the Nassau County Police Department. And what I love about that program is you see young adults that are between 14 and 20 um, develop because of the guidance, the coaching, the mentoring, the training, the opportunities that are provided to them. Today I have we've had thousands go through the program over the years, but we've got hundreds that have gone into law enforcement. But the ones that haven't gone into law enforcement still stay involved. I always say that that program builds good citizens, builds citizens that are focused on community service and their community at large. So I would say those are three of my top off court activities, but there's a lot more, but I don't think we have I don't think we have all day.
No, for sure. So I guess the last thing I'd ask you before we sign off here is, for what would you say to young people that are interested in joining the private security space? What should they be doing? What should they be thinking about? All those kind of things.
What I encourage young adults to consider a career in security. And again, I always say if you have an affinity to just public safety and law enforcement, uh, this may become a career, but this also may be a stepping stone to help you in a career in public safety, like it did for myself. I also, the one thing I asked uh, individuals, young adults, not to focus on is the security officer position, because there is so much more to our industry than just being a frontline security officers. And I touched on some global security operations center positions. I've talked about some investigative positions. I've talked about some uh, threat mitigation, intelligence analyst positions. There's so much more to what falls into the security industry than just being a frontline security officer. So I try to kind of educate them about the how wide spread our industry is, and the fact that I mean they could, through education, hard work, and determination, rise to being a chief security officer for an
Yep.
organization. Because when we started 25 plus years ago, Farhad, um, organizations were looking for a prerequisite in law enforcement for those
Right.
chief security officer positions. Today, organizations value that law enforcement experience, but more importantly, they value the certifications you have, the experience within their sector, the experience in the industry as a whole. So, I mean, we both know many individuals that are in CSO roles that were never in law enforcement. So there's so much
Right.
more that I try to show them about our industry rather than that frontline security officer position that most people see.
I mean, that's fantastic advice, Mario, and I can't thank you enough for joining me today. I'm aside from just the knowledge that you've sort of shared, I'm just happy to have memorialized the discussion between you and I, which we do all the time anyway, personally. So, thank you so much for joining the show. Thank you everyone for tuning in and the support and comments and everything else. And we'll put Mario's company and contact info in the description, and feel free to reach out to him direct or connect with us, and we could connect you. But Mario, I can't thank you enough.
Farhad, thank you for the opportunity. You know, I think the world of you and your organization, and happy to just share my experience. Thank you again.
Don't forget to follow us. We are on LinkedIn and Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube.